Next up, we have a team from Biomedical and Molecular Sciences presenting grading discovery, fair evaluation of students working in scientific teams. We have Charles, Susan, and Nicolle.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to figure out what we're doing here. Got it. Can everyone hear me? Yes, there we go. So I'm Susan Boehnke.
I'm Charlie Hindmarch.
I'm Nicolle Domnik.
And we are from DBMS, Biomedical Molecular Sciences. And we're going to talk about a new course that we've been teaching the last, I guess it's coming into its, 3 iterations we've done. And best practices on grading team-based research projects. So this is our team here. So I'm a neuroscientist. Nicole's a physiologist and also neuroscientist, but more on the molecular side. So we sort of span the breadth of health science research. So how did we get here? Well, there's a couple of things. One, we're going to argue that we think team-based research training has a lot of advantages. When students work together on interdisciplinary teams, they're going to actually get a more meaningful experience. But we also had a practical conundrum. We had in our health science and life science programs, they had accidentally, the algorithm failed and we had twice as many students coming in. So we were going to have this tremendous glut of 4th-year students coming in these past few years that were going to want to have access to meaningful research course experiences. So I like to liken it to what we call the Hunger Games of finding a 499 supervisor. But when you have 400 students and they're vying for spots in the labs of about maybe 40 research-intensive faculty, we've got a problem. So how do we solve this? One is to provide them with team-based learning. So we applied for a grant back a few years ago. I always have to write this down. The Technology Equipment and Renewal Fund from the province of Ontario that was matched by a donor. That was our Dean Philpott, who helped facilitate all that. And the idea was, why don't we build labs for undergraduate students where they can execute their own research projects in teams? And then we could have faculty that would mentor them, and then it's potentially we can get more students through. But how do we do that more meaningfully? And this is just an example of the labs that we built with that money from the provincial government. We have molecular labs that are cutting edge. That's the 5th floor Botterill Hall. I have a neurotech discovery lab over in Abramsky Hall where students can do experiments of their own design through cutting edge neurotechnology equipment. And so I'll just keep chatting. So these are really innovative spaces where the students can execute their own research projects. There. Right, so we have this conundrum. Too many students, not enough research supervisors. So what can we do to solve this? And then this raises the next question. If we go to a team-based approach, how do we fairly grade them so that there's not slackers and that there's not people that are doing the bulk of the work of the research project? Please work now. So this just highlights the 3 iterations we've had. We started with a pilot before we even had a course code. This was back right after we had got the money. We were still building the labs, quite frankly. And that was so successful. Each one of us took on one team that the next year we launched it more full scale. Last year we had 56 students. That was the 24-25 term. We were able to recruit a number of faculty to act as advisors or supervisors for these students. We had 12 teams altogether. This past year, we had 9 teams and 6 supervisors. And you would think that means we're going backwards. But then this year, we've had a massive increase in application. I think we have, is that it there? 134 students that have applied to be part of this program. Now that the word has gotten out, that their peers have talked about the advantages of this program, we're there. So we are allowed to have people from outside of life science and health science. So if you are from other departments, you're welcome to pass this on to their students. We've had people from biology and kinesiology as well. And this is sort of the requested fields that students look to work in. We sort of give them the option of, do you want to do research in neuroscience and neurotechnology? Do you want to do research in physiology or more traditional wet lab molecular work? And so they choose when they do their application, and then we try to put them into teams.
Okay, and that really nicely brings us on to the main thrust of the talk. And the question that we're asking really is about grading academic subjects, but through a team-based lens. Because anybody who's ever taught a class, it's the biggest groan that you're going to get when you say it's a team-based assignment. Because as the quote from the internet says, university where everyone is smarter than you except for the lab partners that you've been paired with. And it's a constant struggle. But unfortunately, what we say to them is that being at work, and obviously we are training these students to be productive members of the workforce, but being at work is a little bit like having family. You don't get to choose your family and you don't get to choose your colleagues. You walk in on your first day to an established team of people who all know what they're doing, and you have to join that clan to some extent and become part of them. So really teamwork, even though that students don't like it at a university level, unfortunately, it is the reality of professional working life. And in this biosciences, there's pretty good evidence to actually substantiate this. So this is actually a graph of the percentage on the y-axis, the percentage of authored papers from a single author. And this is from biomedical disciplines. But as you can see in the last 20 years, you can see that there has been a significant drop of single authored papers. So scientific teams need to work together. In actual fact, from people like us who are aware of the technology, you can actually see where the drops align with certain advances in technology, where all of a sudden scientists have to be increasingly specialized and work in increasingly diversified teams in order to be able to satisfy the increasingly large questions we're trying to ask as scientists. And as you can see, students and teams do better. There's a glut of information there, and you're very welcome to take a photo of the slide for the references, but you can probably find them yourselves. Students do better when they work in teams. They may enhance collaborative teams, teamwork, conflict resolution, and project management, all things that we require of mature, fully formed colleagues as they turn into once they graduate. So our mission is to facilitate teamwork and recognizing individuals at the same time. And this is a complex way, a complex balance we need to set. So we try and set strong foundation of expectations. So the early parts of our course are about talking specifically about teamwork and coaching them in teamwork. Also coaching them in things like DISC, which is a system that actually looks at behaviors of different people in the workforce and actually facilitates the way that we can communicate with different people within your team. We ensure that contact times build comprehensive impressions, so we talk to our students an awful lot, and we actually try and incorporate individual level grading in them, which we actually feel actually differentiates the pack at the end. So we like to talk about culture. So it is advantage to us that we have a long run time of this. This isn't a 16-hour course, this is a year-long course. So we have 8 months to build a culture of teamwork. We also ask them to create a constitution. And this is a self-guided exercise that is available for grades. And the idea is that they lay out things like conflict resolution. Who does what? Who communicates with whom? What happens when something goes wrong? Because we believe giving autonomy is actually better than them squabbling about grades at the end. We like to give them autonomy so that they can actually build their teams effectively and actually focus on the prize, which is the scientific discoveries we hope that they will make. We offer grades for teamwork, of course. So in addition to all of the individual parts that we grade through peer review. So we ask them to essentially make an assessment of each other on the team. And we give guidance. We say nobody's a 10 and nobody's a 1, because one of those is kind of cruel and unkind and the other one is unrealistic. Everyone's got room for growth. And if that growth is going to be relevant, the feedback is important. We also ask the PIs to individually review each of the students that they've been exposed to. And we give quite a large weighting to this. And we tell the students that this is essentially lifted from their shoulders, and actually their performance as a team across multiple metrics are being assessed throughout the term.
All right, and so this has very much been an evolution that has been an evolution in progress and continues to be so. We've tried to be fairly responsive in how we've developed this course over the last 3 years. And so at its inception, it was really embodying the spirit of, we want this to be a team-based experience. As you can see from sort of syllabus outline number 1 on the far left here, it was exclusively team-based deliverables in its first year. At that time, we did start building a small scholarship of teaching and learning study, which we then implemented in our second year when we did have a larger cohort to work with, asking for both student and also faculty supervisor impressions of the course and of the deliverables, whether or not they felt that their contributions as a team member to the collective team were recognized, accounted for or not. And based on that, we've made some iterative changes over the last few years. You'll see that things that are now individual level deliverables are highlighted in red, and those have been sort of added in successive iterations of this course over time. And so in its present iteration, it does have a non-trivial component that is individual in nature. And one of the things that we've been really gratified to see is that when it comes to the peer evaluations, that was a point of significant skepticism from a lot of our colleagues when we first introduced those. There was a feeling that, well, everyone's just going to give their teammates 100% because that way they can pad all the things. That has not been the case. I won't say they've been ruthless, that they've been very fair, but they've also been very critical in those evaluations, and I think have actually taken to them with a far more serious mindset than people maybe initially anticipated. So as far as take-home messages, we feel that having gone through the last couple of years, group-based team research does offer significant potential, which is recognized not only by educators, but also by the students who do seem to have an appetite for these types of courses. There are still some lingering reservations that we've been trying to address over these iterations over time. And I think more to the point, we feel that there are certain conditions that need to be in place in order for that team-based approach, especially since these are randomized teams. The students are randomized, the PIs are randomized to the students as well, to really succeed. And I think that's where spending that time investing in the initial foundations of the course in semester 1 has been incredibly helpful. One of the things that we're trying to build as we continue forward is to foster even greater interdisciplinarity within these courses. So as Susan mentioned, we have had students enrolling from biology, from kinesiology as well. We've had some interest from chemistry and other departments. So we are hoping for this to become a more truly interdisciplinary approach. So this is our shameless plug that if anyone's interested, please reach out to us. We do have a true shameless plug, our contact information here on the end. But thanks very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, or if you are in a discipline that has been using team-based approaches for a longer period of time than we have, we'd also love to get your input or your feedback as well.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm an educational developer, and one of the things I've always struggled with is the difference between groups and teams. And you seem to be using them sort of interchangeably. With a year-long course, this is obviously possible to sort of build that team dynamic, which really isn't for like shorter courses. But do you differentiate between like group work and teamwork in any of your research or anything?
I think I'll maybe say that. I think the hope is to grow from being a group that is formed for them towards becoming a cohesive team. But I think maybe Charlie, I'll let you build off of that.
Yeah, I think that we kind of, I guess, refer to the entire cohort as our group of students, and then there are individual teams that exist between them. And a lot of the contact time is with their PI rather than with us as course coordinators, especially in the second term where research becomes far more prominent. But yeah, you're absolutely right. So some of the courses that I teach where essentially they are more group work because they're laboratory based and you have 5 students who on the day get put into a group of students and they have to kind of, form norm and storm all at the same time. That's a different set of challenges than if you're essentially creating small families within a course who go through the entire range of motions. And I will say I think that in the probably 150 students that we've had one team that's had problems and they've struggled all the way through. And I'm not sure that they ever grasped the fact that their project actually probably was one of the most stimulating and interesting projects that have been created out of all of this. So I don't know what that says about team dynamics, but it was we kept telling them, no, you guys are really onto something in a high friction capacity, but you really are moving on to something quite interesting.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the supports and guidance that you provide the PIs, and share perhaps what has been their experience with this project as well.
I mean, I can kick off and then pass on, but I think that it's worth just stating that there is the traditional way of training these students is in an apprenticeship style project where a single student would enter an established laboratory and basically become part of a team. So most of the PIs who are taking on are already very, very well experienced at coaching and taking on these intensive single students. I think we found some pushback about the idea that taking 5 students may be more work than taking 1 student. And actually, in my experience and the experience of anecdotally speaking, I think that taking 5 students is perhaps a little bit less than 1 student because of the cohesiveness in the team, and actually the fact that they answer a lot of their questions and their confidence questions themselves. So actual fact, there is the giving PI feedback, I think the bulk of it has been trying to persuade them that actually it's maybe an easier pitch than a single student.
Yeah. So I teach 3 teams, 4 teams sometimes in the Neurotech Discovery Lab. That is between 15 and 20 fourth-year students a year. So if I can do that, I would challenge any of my colleagues that they could do 1 team. And how I do that really is they are, as a unit, responsible to coming to me as if I'm like a board of director. And they present their ideas and their challenges that have come up in that week. I meet with them every week. But I do not have to hover over them and supervise them in that sense. It is a bit of a challenge when it comes to reference letters because they have such a great experience. I had this on my phone up because I wanted to read some quotes. This is one. Developing a project from concept to completion was a valuable learning opportunity. I'm excited to carry these skills forward as I begin my career. They have ownership over this, and so the peer pressure on each other is actually what drives their progress. But yes, I haven't quite come up with a solution for how to manage the reference letter. I'm still writing reference letters. It's killing me.
We've actually tried a little bit to help with that, in that when we have them doing their PI evaluations or even peer evaluations within the Microsoft form, they're prompted to specifically please download a copy of the PDF of this form and then bank those so that when the time comes, you don't necessarily have to reach back into the recesses of your brain hole and think, what was this person like? But you have these documents that you've been writing over the course of the year that you can refer back to and use as your writing material. So that we've tried to include little things like that to facilitate it, but also a work in progress.